my sales were higher than they had ever been, but my bottom line was the lowest it had ever been.
They hired you to tell them how they get what they want or as close to it as possible.
You are not selling your clients. And for years, that's what I did.
I have 100 something workflows in here that are just like, this is how I'd like this part of my business to run. No one in my company has seen them. I am trying to, teach through the scars, teach through the issues that we've faced and how we work through them. I was by myself. I had no help. And then, I would have this project, and it was my first project, and I knew I needed to line up work, and I had like opportunities kind of brewing. I had this one whole house renovation that went before I started my company. He was like, hey, I want you to help me renovate it, like do a full renovation. I'm going to handle demo and I'll let you know when that's done. And I mean, looking back, it's funny because, so many red flags about how that project unfolded. But at the time it was, hey, this is a whole house remodel. And they were an architect. And, but I would be on the tools during the day, and at night I was either estimating work or I was in my shop building something for the job the next day. And I took on everything, dude. I remember, I actually looked my contract value for that whole house renovation.
Yeah.
And I didn't do everything.
For the architect?
Yeah, for the architect. It was probably, let's just say it's 3,000 square feet. The outside of the house didn't get stripped. It was like patching, roofing, and siding here and there. I think I replaced all the windows. But I think I contracted some of the subs, but it was like a hodgepodge. My total contract was like $170,000.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I remember looking at it like years later. I'm like, I don't remember what my scope of work was, but there's no way I actually made money. And the kid I talked to today, that's a student, he had asked about, specifically about making money. And I was like, when you're a solo guy and say I charged $170,000 for that job, like I still put $170,000 in my pocket. It might have taken me twice as long, but it's still the same cash in my pocket.
Yeah.
And I didn't recognize that and realize that, I was working for such a low dollar value until I had employees. And when I charged, $170,000 for the next job and it took twice as long and I had no money because now I'm upside down, it was like, oh, wait, that cash goes out a lot faster because now they're working a lot more hours. And I agreed to the hourly rate. There was so many times where, I would just throw an estimate together and like no thought and just be like, all right, I just got to get this out, and shit would stick, and then I'd have to figure it out. And I had no idea if I was making money. It was just like, hey, this seems reasonable. Or, I feel like that is the part, like especially now, right? Like 12 years later, looking at how much of a process we have and like the things that we have in place, and to think like none of that shit existed when I started, and nor did I even know that half of it was a requirement, despite my experience in commercial.
Yeah, that I do find that somewhat interesting, being that like you were dealing with inspectors and obviously full permitted projects and comprehensive budgets.
$100 million budget.
Yeah, that like you then go to residential and it's like, oh, I'm just gonna wing it. But I like it is. You also have to take into account that you just don't know what you don't know. Mm. And even I can recall starting out, and I grew up working for my dad, and we were working on a lot of rental properties, just stuff that wasn't high end, and you weren't getting paid to do stuff. And like I never, like, site protection wasn't a thing. Like if you had to go into somebody's house and cut a wall out, like you went in and cut a wall out, and it was on them if they didn't move stuff out of there. And I started working for some other people, and they're laying down drop cloths and then like setting up plastic and isolating a space and then getting a porta potty. And I was like, what is this black magic? So like I just didn't know that. And then I think one of the big issues is as you learn, you start implementing and integrating those practices, but you're either at a point where you can't capture those costs, your client base won't be willing to pay for them, or you just don't know that you need to charge more for that. You just think that that's normal, and you start like eating the cost. That was something that burnt me for a long time. Is like, yeah, it's getting better. The jobs are getting more complex. My execution's better, but I wasn't ever like really charging more for it. Mm-hmm. Like the numbers were bigger, but then I just put more shit into the job. So like at the end of the day, I was probably making less money.
This is where it's like, no, but we operate like design build because we get involved early. And I know we preach this constantly. We talk about pre-construction constantly, but I really want to dig into this hyper specifically about the way we do it, because I think that there's some things that, like, just frankly, when I communicated to today, I was like, man, those are the selling points of why this is so important. And it's not, it's way more, and we've said this before, it's way more than estimating a project. But he was like, can you walk me through what this process typically looks like? And I said, sure. And ultimately I said, if you have a project, you're developing a project, ideally we get involved immediately. Like we just signed a pre-construction agreement with a client. They don't even have an architect yet. They had a lot. They ultimately decided to walk away from the lot, but we still have an agreement with them. They have a retainer with us. Like, it's just sitting there waiting for us to deploy time against it. But they know they want to work with us as a builder, and they have an understanding on who the architect's going to be. It's just they need the lot, another lot, and then they'll onboard the architect. That's an ideal situation because we are, from the beginning, we get to set the parameters, and we essentially, guide the design through that process. More common is where an architect has a schematic design. So, an architect came to us a couple of months ago, another project that we have under pre-construction, they had a schematic design put together, and we look at it and we give, we basically gave them a high level, what we call tier 1 estimate. And it's usually a few hours worth of work. And it's like, hey, based on the information you're giving me, I think this project's going to be somewhere around $3 million. Now, initially, that conversation happens rather quickly in terms of getting them like in a ballpark around what that cost is going to be. But recently I've been doing this full tier 1, like super detailed proposal. And, I hadn't been doing that until we had a pre-con for a long time. And it probably sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but what I have found is that I'm doing a few hours worth of work that allows me to go back to the client and show how much I understand about the building process. And it's giving them something to actually sink their teeth in. And I'm not necessarily doing full takeoffs. I'm ripping data out from other projects that are similar, and I'm plugging them in based on, some sort of calculation. Sometimes it's just like, hey, that house is very similar to this one that we bid or built. Why don't we just take that, and then you can do the simple thing. It's like, all right, that was $850 a square foot, just times it over on this house and get a budget. But that's where you're getting this kind of lump sum. What I've done in this case is I might go and take all of my line items and figure out, hey, what percentage of the overall cost are all of these line items, and then work backwards from the square foot price, or what the square foot price is per line item, whatever it is, and then plug that in. So now they have something that is realistic. I'm obviously scanning through and saying, okay, well, you can't really, reduce the cost of a septic system, for that house versus this house. It's going to be the same. What I'm getting at here is I have found that by providing them, especially on something that is more complicated, providing them something that shows not only that you understand how to build it, but how you are going to help control the project, is giving our clients a lot of confidence in our approach. So our clients are looking at this like, wow, you really took the time to understand the project. And so this is the important part. We communicate like, hey, this is not a budget. Like, this is not your budget for your project. We cannot build off this. This is an effort to show you how we would go about pricing this. And our role now is to protect that, not to tell them. They didn't hire you to tell them that they can't build what they want. They hired you to tell them how they get what they want or as close to it as possible. And I think in this scenario, like a $2 million swing is a lot, but let's just use that for a minute. Architect designs something, you go through, you're under pre-construction, you're really sinking your teeth into how this thing is built. It's $5 million. Client's budget's $3 million. Okay, at that point, we don't stop our work and then say, hey, it's $5 million. What do you want to do? And I'm going to come back to this whole what do you want to do thing a lot, because I think that is something that a lot of people are doing that is ruining, their opportunities in the marketplace. We say, all right, well, obviously this home is going to be $5 million. How do we bring an option to them that hits their requirement, their budget? Because they came to you and said, my budget is $3 million. Now, if in a different world, you might have been able to been involved earlier and then prevented this whole $5 million exercise, but you weren't. And your job is to find a $3 million path. So it might be that, hey, you communicate what is designed as $5 million, but here's how we can deploy $3 million appropriately. We'll phase out the pool house. We're going to reduce some of the scope here, and you kind of do this first pass at value engineering. And there's three things that I've basically boiled value engineering down to, and it's you can remove scope, reduce scope, or defer scope. And reducing is obviously the easiest one. It's like, what can I get rid of? And there's always 10, 20% of the scope of the project that a client likes but doesn't need. It's the stuff that the architect brings into onto the table as like they've explored it. It's something that they would really love, but it's not a high priority list for them. So focus on those things first. And then, okay, can you reduce things? Great example of, when you're building, a big house and it's got a ton of masonry on the exterior. It's like, okay, can you reduce that masonry on maybe the elevations that aren't as prominent, rather than spending, $200 a square foot for, masonry on the side of the home? What if you switch that to a shingle or a clapboard? And then deferring scope. And I think deferring is one that we find that a lot of people take advantage of is, hey, I know for example, a lot of times our basements are completely finished. A lot of our clients say, don't even worry about the basement. I know we want the craft room, the gym, the extra. That is not important to me. So if I can defer that until later, like a year from now, 2 years, 5 years from now, I will do that. And now you have all of these levers that you can start pulling, but you're not destroying the architecture of the project. And you're not in this like typical blaming cycle of, oh, it's over designed, so it's overpriced. Instead, you're working with the architect and again, protecting what they're trying to do, but doing it in a smarter way. If you go through proper pre-construction, you are effectively de-risking the construction process. And one of the clients stopped me and he was like, dude, I love that. I'm like, what? And he goes, de-risking. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's the whole purpose of pre-construction, is to de-risk the project. I'm like, pre-construction is more than just pricing, but let's be real. Everyone is very concerned with the price because the price determines the scope. The price also determines the schedule. Like everything revolves around ultimately the cost in one way or the other. And our goal is to work through pre-construction to a point where when we start construction, my contingency line item is less than 5%. Mm-hmm. And I can explain to you what that contingency is for. That contingency is for these three things that have not been flushed out, or this one thing that is an unknown to us until we start. Or it's the fact that this project's 24 months long and I can't tell my painter to hold his price for 20 months.
So on that same note, one of the other topics was who owns scope gaps. And I think that's important during pricing.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a lot of thoughts on that.
How are you accounting for that in your estimating process? What are some tips and tricks? How are you managing scope gaps? How are you ensuring that your subcontractors aren't leaving this hard line where it's like, this is where our job ends and this is where it starts.
I'll give you an example first. Low voltage wiring for HVAC. I didn't buy that out on 6 projects in a row. And I'm like, why do I keep doing this? And my HVAC guy's like, the electrician does it. And the electrician's like, no, the HVAC guy does it. I'll
My
put
HVAC guy does it.
And it's just, it was like this one thing that just we kept missing. And finally, like, it just went into our kind of lessons learned bucket where it's like, hey guys, remember, low voltage wiring has to be owned by electrician, because we want the electrician to own it and make it nice and neat. Frankly, because HVAC guys duct tape it to the side of their equipment and float wire nuts everywhere. But so to answer your question, the way we typically go about it is we'll draft the scope of work for each trade when we're asking them to put together a proposal.
Yep.
Hey, this is what we are looking for from you.
During pre-construction.
During pre-construction. So, concrete. Hey, we got a main house and an ADU. Here's the structural drawings. Please assume that, the hole will be prepped and ready for you. Assume that you'll be doing this in the winter, so you'll need frost protection. Assume that, our tolerance on the top of wall was within a 1/4 inch. Like we'll give them the assumptions to make. Like, actually, we just did a slab, right? And it had to be dead flat. So we were very clear, like, hey, here's all the slab detailing. I want you to make the assumption that this slab will be placed within a 1/4 inch tolerance across the entire slab. And they're like, so, all right. They're like, that's really hard to hit. I'm like, understood. Like, but we need to set the expectation that this has to be super flat.
Yeah.
Because we didn't set an expectation on another one, and there was, dips and low points. And they were like, yeah, that's within tolerance, which, one could argue it's not, but that was the product of it. So we'll start there. We also are, when we ask a vendor to review or price a project, we are also asking them very clearly, like, hey, we'd like a proposal for this scope. Here's the scope. Here's the assumptions that you make. I'd like you to also just be very clear on anything that you are excluding. Please make sure you list your exclusions. And also, please, if there's anything within the design of this that you see is an unnecessary or a complicated thing that is driving the cost, please communicate that back to us. In other words, like, is there any value engineering opportunities? And by doing that first and upfront, you're preventing this back and forth of, hey, we're over budget. Is there anything that you can do? It's like, dude, I just spent 8 hours looking at it 3 weeks ago. Like, now you're asking me to look at it again, and we don't even know if we're going to do the job. Put it all together in one shot. And we get good feedback where it's, we had a mechanical design and our plumber looked at it. He was like, hey, it was a big house, $500,000 in mechanical. And he's like, however, because we asked the question, he goes, you have some mechanical in here that is unnecessarily expensive. This particular unit is a commercial unit. You do not need to use this for this house. And so they raised it. It was like a $50,000 savings. And we went back to the engineer and we said, hey, what was the reasoning for using this? And they're like, sorry, that's just a boilerplate spec for us. Like, if we hadn't asked the question, we would have assumed that, we might have assumed that, hey, it's $500,000, and the client, hey, sorry, it's $500,000. That's what's designed. But instead we asked the question and realized, oh, that's actually not necessary here. Because like, to your point, like, none of this is perfect. There's hundreds of people involved. There's all these layers to it. So asking the right questions and making sure that you're getting that information up front. But ultimately, who owns the scope gap? Like, that is what you are being hired as a general contractor and and you're managing a job. That is your responsibility. So if you're not vetting your trades, in these proposals, ultimately that responsibility falls on you. What do you think in the last 10 years, is the one thing that you invested in or learned that has like changed the way that you run your business?
I think it probably has to do with the cost of doing business and the production side of things, where I was growing to a point where I was adding people to my business, but I didn't have anything in place to manage those people, to communicate what needs to get done, to take what was in my head, take what's on my spreadsheet, and then communicate that to the people who were working for me, whether I was there or not. So there was an expectation of what needed to get done. So when I had full-time employees, my sales were higher than they had ever been, but my bottom line was the lowest it had ever been. And I was just somewhat supporting a lifestyle and paying for the business to stay afloat. And I thought that was the answer, right? I thought that it was, if I have one more guy, if I put one more van on the road, if I can take that one more job, if I can truly do 2 jobs at once instead of 1.5, I thought that those were the answers. So I think that there were a few things in my life that came up that I had to basically say, I need to take a step back. I need to get my life in order. I need to slow down in order to speed up. And when I did that, it did really shine a lot of light on the deficiencies and hiccups within my business. And it was more so on the production end of things. And it's because I didn't have any systems in place to be able to communicate what was happening on paper to what was actually happening in the field. And there was just no connection between them. So I'd bid a job and I'd have certain expectations, and then I would set myself loose and set people loose on these jobs, and then there were no touch points along the way. So I was just overproducing, over executing, and losing a ton of money. And I really didn't know that until you just don't know, because you think that the money's there, and then it's like at the end of the job when you're having to close the job out and pay subs, and you don't have enough money to pay your subs, that you're like, oh damn, I didn't make any money on this job, and I didn't know it until 3 weeks before we close it out, and I've been here for 5 months.
The number one complaint that you hear from people that build is always related back to bad communication. It's all like, no matter what. Oh, they were over budget. No, they weren't over budget. They just poorly communicated the budget. They were behind schedule. No, they weren't. They were actually on schedule, but they poorly communicated the fact that when you add a pool, it adds 8 weeks worth of work. Like that, it always can be pinpointed back to communication, and that is what we're so focused on, through our process. We just finished the Echo Pond project, and I was chatting with the client, and I was like, hey, I'd love to, get some feedback. And they were like, hey, we want to do this formally, but just like off the cuff. You guys were like, he raved about our communication. He was like, it's unbelievable how well you guys communicated through the process and always made sure that we understood what was going on. And he's like, and I have a unique perspective because my friend is currently building in X state with, this, X builder, and it's an absolute disaster. And they were reaching out to me like, hey, what was it like working with NS Build? And they were like, literally, we knew exactly what was going on at all times. Like, their communication is phenomenal. And I'm like, that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I think like when it's done correctly, it can and would resolve the issues.
I also think that brings up a really good point, that there are, when you're asking these questions, right, and it's your vetting process, whether it's a lead intake form, whether it's just the way that you engage and interact with clients who call you, email you, text you, whatever it may be, there's certain questions that are going to be more analytical, that they're going to assess projects from a financial basis. Like they're more, what I say is quantitative, right? You have these quantitative questions or thresholds, benchmarks that you're going to be basing your vetting of these clients on. But you also have to consider that there's a lot of qualitative aspects to that as well. And one of the questions I had for you were, what are some techniques that you used early on that you thought were really helpful, which actually wound up being misleading or leading you to the wrong client? And for me, it was focusing too heavily on the quantitative aspect of my vetting, right? Where it's, do they live in the right neighborhood? Do they have the right budget? Are they of the right demographic? And I think that is really important, right? It dictates who you can work for, typically their finances. There are exceptions to that rule. But focusing so heavily on that created what I would consider to be like ego-driven leads and work. And a lot of times clients that I don't feel that I should have worked for, jobs that I was chasing, that it was more so about the job than about the experience and the client. And I think that for me, that's one of the big things. It's still a very important part of my vetting process. I still focus heavily on, are they in the right neighborhood? Is the benchmark for what this job's going to cost? Does that fit? But I also like the next step of that, which I didn't focus on enough, was the qualitative aspect of that lead and of that client. Are they somebody that trusts me? Are they somebody who's willing to follow my lead? Are they somebody who wants to work with us because they enjoy our process, regardless of what the job costs, right? Yeah. And because it could be, I could work for somebody which it's the same type of job and they have $100,000 less to spend on the budget, but it actually makes me more money and it's a more enjoyable process because that client trusts me and because they came to me because of who I am and what I do rather than just the numbers worked out. So that's something that I screwed up, and I think that we pitch and we educate people on even through the pre-construction where it's like you need to focus on the demographics, you need to focus on the psychographics of your client to understand how to shape your marketing, your lead funnel, everything else. But I, for a long time, allowed my ego and those numbers to drive really the basis of my vetting, where the simplest thing I could ask somebody is, how did you hear about me? Or why do you want to work with me?
Right.
And like that the numbers need to work, but that can be more telling than somebody who wants to spend the right amount on a kitchen for me. The initial part of the lead acquisition and vetting your clients, you are not selling your clients. And for years, that's what I did, right? The lead came in, the email came in, the intake form came in, and it was off to the races. I have to sell them and convince them that I'm the right fit. And that was just because I had put myself in a position that it was not sustainable with my business. And now that I feel I'm at a place that's more sustainable, more lucrative, I understand and value my time more. I'm not just frantically trying to keep my head above water. I understand so much better that once the inquiry comes in or once the lead is on your plate, it's not necessarily time to sell as much as time to understand who that client is and filter them through your vetting process. Like, it's time to discover what the components of this job are and if this is a decent fit from a client perspective, a personality perspective, a budget perspective. It's not just selling.
We put all this effort into, like you said, paid advertising or marketing, when it's like, dude, what about all the clients that you've done work for?
Yeah.
Have you circled back with them? And we'll talk about like how to keep a regular cadence with someone, so it's not just like out of the blue, like, hey, Rob, like, I know I built you a house a couple years ago, and any of your buddies looking to build a house?
Yeah.
Because it is, it's kind of fostering that relationship, but it's, some people, firsthand experience of like when I have done outreach and basically kind of like reintroduced like the type of clients we want and circle back with clients that we've worked with and that we've enjoyed working with. I've had people being like, oh, I thought you were just too busy. Like, I'd be happy to refer you work. Based on social media, you have way too much going on. I'm like, oh man, like, no, like I
not
want more.
Wrong.
Well, not wrong, but like, I want more clients like you, and this is a long process. So yeah, I think people undervalue the just asking their network. I also, kind of related, they don't have to be clients. Like, you probably have 1,000 people in your contacts of your phone, never mind the thousands of emails you have. I've done it where I've kind of done some mass outreach of just every person in my phone, every person in my email, just like, hey, this is what I got going on. If you know somebody, and that's turned into work where it's like, you know what, I've been wanting to reach out and I haven't, but I'm glad you reached out. So, hey, let's work together.
Yeah. And I think that for me, and something that I've learned is you have to continually get referrals. Like you have to, it's not just like, oh yeah, I have the amount of leads that I need. I've reached out to past clients. Like my business has changed over the years, and I want my referrals to properly convey my marketing message. Like who I am as a business, what I do, why I'm different. And my referrals and my testimonials from 10 years ago are going to paint a different picture than I need for today and that I want for today. So it's something that you constantly have to nurture, and you constantly have to cultivate those referrals and those testimonials.
I hired this girl, Caitlin, as my executive assistant a couple months ago at this point. And I feel like I've said I need an assistant for years now. And my goal with hiring her was to basically offload all of the silly tasks that are on my plate, like day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
And just have her manage it. And one of the things that we said right from the beginning is like, hey, you are going to manage my inbox. Just because I get like 200 something emails a day, and it's like open on one screen, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, I'll just address it right now. And my calendar. And first off, adding someone to your inbox, I feel like was wildly like personal.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I don't know if I get emails that I want people seeing. Not like inappropriate, just, you know, I feel like it's everything that's going on in my life. So it's like, all right, hey, I'm just going to have you sign an NDA because, you know, I have no idea what you're going to see, and not that I'm hiding anything, but just, you know, just for the sake of like protecting the information, especially from a business perspective. But today was I think probably the first, like my inbox is literally, in my inbox, there's 5 emails, 0 unread. Like everything has been handled.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, and like we cleaned it up, we unsubscribed a bunch of stuff, and then it's my calendar, and she's been really focused on making sure that she basically has 2 calendars on my Google Calendar. Is she's got all these gray boxes, which is the ideal thing I'm doing at that time, based on like everything I have on my plate. Here's how you should structure your day to make sure you get everything done. And then in color on top of that would be, hey, this is what I end up putting in that time block. And I shared a screenshot of my calendar, I think, with the Contractor Coalition group text a couple weeks ago. And I think Kayla or Morgan was like, dude, I do not envy that calendar. And I feel like forever, I mean, myself included, you look at it, it's like, man, look at my week. It's so busy. I got so much shit going on. I'm like, I'm gonna crank through stuff. And then I look at this piece of paper that's sitting next to me right now. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things on it that I wanted to get done yesterday. None of them are crossed out. And the reason I wrote them down was because these are going to be these are priority. Like, I know I have a calendar telling me what I'm doing. I have Asana with all my task management. I got a Google Doc or an Apple Notes saying like, these are the ideas I have and the things I want, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, but I got to write these down because these are priority. Like, these are my biggest, you know, fish to catch. And I don't get any of them done. I mean, it's no surprise. Like, I think we know that being busy doesn't mean you're being efficient. So we structured it. I got to pull it up because I don't remember what it looks like. Oh, I have one unread email that just came through. But I essentially have them, I have labels now. It's action required, for review, or handled. And basically what that is like, action required means I need to get in there and address it. So anything that requires my attention, she moves into that folder. Anything that's in review means, hey, I've already drafted something. I think I can handle this for you. Can you just give me a thumbs up? And then, whatever the third one was, taken care of or handled is, hey, I took care of it. Like, you do not need to respond.
Yeah.
And so now I'm just training myself to only open the folder that says, requires my attention. I want to be up to speed on everything, all the projects. Like, I'm just reading through. But the larger point here is not so much about the monotonous or the emails coming through and like being distracted by it, but it's more about the protection of time and making sure that I'm not drowned by stuff that is just like the whole, hey, this is hard, so I'm going to go chip off a couple easy things and I'll come back to the hard.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you just need to do the hard shit first and get that off your plate. And then at the end of the day, go through the emails, go through social media content approvals, things like that, where it's just like, it's lower brain power, and get the harder shit done first. And for me, I love thinking in the clouds. I love thinking about process. I was going through my Google Drive the other day. I'm like, I have 100 something workflows in here that are just like, this is how I'd like this part of my business to run. No one in my company has seen them. One of the things I struggled with when we were putting this together is like walking that line of hypocrisy and teaching from scars. Like, am I really qualified to teach this? And that is like, very early on, I thought about that a lot, especially when we went through the first pre-construction course and we shared that. And I was like, man, am I really qualified to teach this? And coming around that second time, I kind of got over that and realized that what I'm doing here is exactly what I shared, 20 minutes ago, is that I am forcing myself to complete my thought here. And this is built on, like, this is not like, I want to just be super clear. Like, this is not here's exactly how you do the thing and this is your outcome. Like, I think anyone that says that to you, like in education or alternative education, is lying to you. Like, that's the fake guru shit. This is, hey, this is how I run my business, and you should be able to learn from it. Take something from it. It is not a step-by-step guaranteed outcome thing. And when I got over that and realized that's not what I'm trying to educate, I am trying to, teach through the scars, teach through the issues that we've faced and how we work through them. That is what people ultimately resonate with. 567 episodes I think we've recorded, 9 years of doing this podcast. It's like, that's what everyone says. I like the real world aspect of it. I like the fact that you guys are talking openly about what you're dealing with, how you dealt with it, what's going on. That's why we have guests on, that when we ask questions, we want them to get uncomfortable and answer it, because someone else out there is struggling with the same fucking thing. And that is ultimately, like, what it came down to is that what we want to do and what we're doing is sharing, hey, here's what I've done. Here's what I do. This is how I do it. This is why I do it. And if you'd like, this is how you could implement it. These are the things that you need. Let me walk you through these things.
Are there aspects of this that you feel are potentially more valuable than other aspects of it, or is that just dependent upon like where you are within your business, the size of your business, and what you do? So like there's 5 components of what we put together.
Yeah.
And somebody actually just emailed us, like, if we were going to dig into one of these, what would it be? My answer was pre-construction's kind of the flagship of what we're doing, and I think that it entails a lot of the other aspects of this system. And I think it's fairly comprehensive there, but I don't know if that was the right answer.
You want to know why I do agree with you? Is that the premise behind pre-construction is understanding and valuing what you do as a business. Like you don't, when you are not following that process, you just don't, like, you're not valuing what you do. Like, you're giving away so much for free. By actually going through that formal process, it is forcing you to assign a value to who you are and what your business does.
Yeah.
Early on, and in order to do that, you need to understand so much about your business. So yes, I would agree with you on that. Guys, real quick, if you want more information on this, we're going to host a free workshop August 11th, 2026 at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going for 2 hours. I don't know if I told you that, Tyler. We're doing 2 hours live workshop. And we're going to dig into all 5 of these and talk specifically about how they impact our business. So there's a link in the description, but make sure you sign up for that. There is limited seats. I realize how many people are coming in, and there's limited amount of seats there that we have capacity for. So we'll probably get to a point where we can't let everyone in. So I would advise signing up.